It's time to get this Marchetti together. Let's get to it. Welcome everybody back to Just Plain Crazy. I'm Brennan. Thanks for joining me again for another episode down in the layer. So, on the bench, this is the Sebart Marchetti. This is a 66-inch wingspan Marchetti available in two different schemes. Of course, it's got to be from Gator-Rc. It's time to get this thing assembled. We're going to get everything cleaned off on the bench. We got our protective little foamy cover down on here, so that way we don't put any marks in the covering and we keep it looking pristine. But we're going to get everything off of here, and we're going to start to fire up the heating sock and heating iron. And the first thing we're going to do is get covering any wrinkles out and get everything pressed down so we can get all the surfaces attached and ready to go. So enough of the jib jab. Let's get to work.
Now the first thing we do is we take the heat gun to all the parts. That takes the wrinkles out. And then we go ahead and we use the heating iron with the hot sock on it. And that will go ahead and just really kind of press that covering down into the wood to keep it firmly in place so it doesn't want to bubble as much on us. Sometimes it takes a couple times to get this right. Please be very careful as you get next to the sides of any trim or any of the open edges. You want to make sure those edges are sealed first before you go ahead and start shrinking them, because otherwise they will pull away and you'll wind up having too little covering where you need it.
All right, so check it out. First steps in. We're going to do something different here. So what they want you to do is they want you to use this lens. They want you to install it from the back side. All right, and then they want you to take one of these LEDs and put it into a piece of wood so that the LED in the wood is inserted into there like that. I think that's an awful lot of grief, but what I don't understand is if you look at this teardrop, that thing really isn't anywhere close to the size of that opening, like at all. So to me, that's not going to look so good. So I am going to opt for a set of UniLights to put in here. And now when you put this in there, I don't know if you'd be able to see that. I hope on the camera there's gaps right there and right there. So there's a couple ways you can attack this. You can grind that out and 3D print something or what, but what I like to do is I like to do things that are going to be fairly simple and that anybody can do. So that is my install of the light on this side, and all I did is I filled in that gap with epoxy and I made that lens fit in there. Hopefully you could see that. It turned out really nice. And of course, I like nice bright lights on a model. And UniLights will give you that more so than the little LED and free wing controller here. So all of this stuff may be good for another project. I'm not going to use it here. Now, simple trick here. I've used just some regular epoxy and mixed black paint in with it, stirred it up. And that's what I use to fill in that gap. So what we're going to do here is we're going to grind this one out. We're going to get this inserted in there. We're going to epoxy fill all of that, and we're going to get attached to this wing, just like we did for that one. Let's go.
Now the first thing I'm doing here, since it's black paint, marker won't show up, is I used my X-Acto knife to scribe an outline of the light pattern so I know where to grind away with the Dremel tool. You want to do this at a very low RPM because fiberglass parts usually grind away very quickly. I also have a very small file set. I got that from Harbor Freight, and just with a couple light strokes you can remove a lot of material. So the curved edge file helps you a lot when it comes down to getting a nice clean edge, so you have a nice tight fitting light. After the light is in a good place, I go ahead and I tape off all the way around it. I mix up my part A and part B epoxy, add a little bit of paint and a toothpick, and I go ahead and fill that in. give it, and you only need 5-minute epoxy here, but go ahead and give it just about 2-3 minutes and get that tape peeled off. You want to start peeling the tape before that epoxy really starts to chemically react and get sticky. From there, we just need to make sure that we use a fish and we get that wiring fished all the way through the wing.
All right, there's our second wingtip light. That's done, filled in. Looks really good. So, yeah, off to the next steps. All right, next step, we have to glue in aileron horns. So the ones we're looking for are these right here. Okay, let me actually slide this camera a little bit forward. So we're going to be using these. There is a couple others. So those are going to be for your rudder, and the one that has the longer portion to it, that one is going to be for the elevator. So these are the ailerons. Now, they also come with these doodads here, so we can argue and fight about this all we want. So often, at times, these things are made to go here. They will slide over, and then as you put these in, these things will go here, right? And then they get glued in. That's not helping you guys at all. Unless you're going to carve that away and carve that covering out, this thing isn't helping at all to bond anything. So there's no real purpose to that. It's not going to benefit you. And I'm not cutting or carving any of that covering out, so it's not going to happen. So really, I guess what I'm telling you is I don't use those. Now, when it comes down to putting these in, I've shown you guys in many videos, if you can keep that hinge line perfect in here, the hole on the horn right on the hinge line, that will get you the most neutral feel inverted to upright, because it's the same amount of throw in both directions. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. For this one, it's pretty easy on this model to eyeball that, and they actually did a really good job of making sure that these are close. So we're going to pull these out. They already have holes in there, which is great, but you want to take, again, just the mistake that I've seen people make before, and you can see the big difference between sanded and not sanded. You want that glue, epoxy, whatever it is you choose to use, to have a nice surface to bite into. So that's all we have to do there, and we'll do the same thing here. Now, in the instruction manual for these, they show you that you can just glue those in with thin CA. I don't like that. I'm going to use epoxy to do it. And in this case, and you see that's all the longer you have to do that. We're going to use Starbond 5-minute will work just fine here. So we're going to get that opened up. We're going to tape off all around that surface, so that way we don't make a mess on the covering. So you'll see me do that. And then when we mix this, like this Starbond epoxy, this 5-minute stuff, you're going to have an A and a B part. So if you really want to, you can use a measuring cup. But what I found the easiest thing to do is just use a scale. Turn that on, put your cup on there, go ahead and tear the cup so you're back at 0, and then just mix in equal parts. So that's how you know that you've mixed it evenly. So super quick and easy method. But we're going to time lapse. Let's get going. All right, horns are in. As you can see there, they turned out really nice. The Starbond adhesives again, right there, and they're a clear drying epoxy. They came with some nice mixing dishes and this the little silicone scooper and spreader. I like the disposable items rather than having to clean stuff up, but that'll make it so it doesn't really stick on there. You can actually just clean that up fairly easy, but preference, that's up to you. So really good kit. Like I said, we'll use those throughout this build. But on to the next step. So we're going to install our King Max servos. Again, these are the 5325s from Gator. They're going to go in each one of these wings. what we're going to do here is you could see the areas for the servos right there. We're going to have to cut that covering away. But when I cut that, I like to kind of seal right around those edges so you don't see the wood like you do right there. You can actually just take that and press that into the corners. And to do that, we are going to use the heating pencil. Again, with electric, not such a big deal. It's just aesthetics, but it's the way I like it to look. So we're going to use the pencil to do this. If it was glow, it's more important because any of that wood that's exposed and unsealed will wind up sucking up fuel and oil. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. We're going to have to route. This is the connector for our lights. We're going to have to get this routed through this wing. And we're going to have to get that thing poking up through that hole. So we'll do that. This thing is for the retract, so this is going to wind up coming through here also. And then those will go up into the fuselage. Just because it's here, well, I'll show you these. These are just right now holding my CA hinges in so they don't get lost in there. But we'll deal with getting all that set up here shortly. But we're going to go ahead and start getting those servos ready for install. Let's do it. Just in case you guys didn't see, take one of these. When you go to put in eyelets, you can put all 4 on there at one time. Then you can just take them and just keep pushing them through. Super easy way to get that done. All right, guys, now it's time to wick some thin CA into the holes that we made for the servo screws. That makes sure that those screws have a nice bite and they don't come out. Again, we're using thin Star Bond CA. So when you get these things, you can get thick, medium, thin, whatever it is that you're looking for to give you a couple extra caps for it. And they give you a bunch of these pipettes in there. And those things look like this. So these are really nice. You don't have to worry about cleaning them. There's quite a few. You could just chuck that stuff and throw it away. But anyway, we'll put that on there. And then what we also have, which is really cool, use it for a plug or a cleaner or whatever you want in your tips. You can just go ahead and put this little red thing in there. It's got a little nail in the bottom. So all we're going to do now is this thing's prepped and ready to go. Is just take this and just a couple dots right around those holes. Let it weep in. If you wanted to, you could actually coat that whole area. So if you were looking to seal this thing to prevent oil or fuel from wicking in there, you can just go ahead and coat the whole thing as well. They do offer accelerator or kicker. You can get it in the sprays, or they have the brush, so you could brush it actually and then hit it with that. This stuff, I don't want to use accelerator. I want it to soak into the wood. But really nice quality glue, so that's one of the reasons we decided to go with them for this project. But anyway, let's let that stuff dry up here for a second or two, and then we're going to get to servo installation and potentially making extensions for these things. So let's do it. All right, as we get moving along in the wing panels, we're going to get these servos installed, but we have, if you can see here, connector for lighting, one for retracts, and now we have this for servos. And one of the things that I like to do is avoid multiple connections at the wing point. So what I'm going to do is make some extensions in the wing because the servo leads aren't long enough. So I make my own wires and my own extensions. We're going to make that longer. But at one end here in this wing, we're going to use, these are Hansen Hobby. They call them polarized connectors, but they're click lock, so you never have to worry about putting devices on there or having them come apart. But I'll make this one, if you will, this female connector. So from the plane, a male will plug into it, and on the other side, I'll do it just opposite. So there's no way you can ever get anything reversed, and I only ever have 2 connectors to deal with. So we're going to start making some wires, and then we're going to put all of these connectors in one plug. All right, here you go. So that's what that looks like. That's a polarized connector. We use the 9-pin connector. I have 8 of those sockets filled. So we have retracts, we have lights, and we have gear and servos installed. Control horns are nice and dry, so we're ready for hooking up linkage, but we have to glue this in first. So let's talk about CA hinges. Now this kit comes with a couple extra, which is really good. And there's a few ways people go about doing this. Some will take a marker and put a line right across. Some will go ahead, and what I do is I put a push pin in there in the center so I know it can't go one way or the other too far. And then we gotta install these things. Some people actually take a crayon and make a crayon mark straight across, so that way it's waxy and then the CA, the thin CA, doesn't wick in. So here's a couple tips that I'll give you guys. So I like this method, all right? That pin almost keeps my gap about where I want it. I'm going to come in a little bit more, but I have all my pins in there so that way those hinges don't push one way or another. Make sure that your gapping is right and even. You don't want too close one way or another. See how we could slide that? We don't want that to rub. All right, so we got to make sure all that stuff's okay. And we have to make sure that our hinge is an even amount in there. Once all of that is good, you could pull the pins out or leave them in. One of the benefits of leaving them in is you can actually take your CA and wick it down those pins, but you want to make sure that you're using some that are not too big for you, that you can get that gap pushed in there nice and small. So that helps, right? Other people will go ahead and actually take the surface apart, and with the surface completely removed, they will glue in half of the hinge on each side, then put on the elevator onto the stab and glue in the other half. The reason I don't like doing that is because you don't know which way the glue is wicking in and how far out into the hinge, and I don't want to glue on top of glue. I want to glue into the fabric and have the fabric screw there. So what I do is I typically leave mine in. I push my gaps nice and tight. I make sure my hinges are straight, and then I will just chase right down there with some CA, and I'm using thin, and we use these little straws. Again, the Star Bond adhesive is really nice because their little kits include all these little straws in there, and these things you could just take off and throw away. You don't have to worry about clogged tips and all that happy jazz. I also will wick from the top down, and there's a reason for it, because if you go too heavy and all that CA runs anywhere, I would rather have it run down the bottom of the wing than the top of the wing. Because if you put it in this way, it's going to run all over the top and everyone's going to see it. At least here, if you run too heavy, it'll go around the bottom side, and most people will never catch that. Okay, so that being said, let's get our hinges glued in. All right, for now the wings are done, and this is what I'm talking about. So one wing panel will have this connector, one wing panel has this connector. Yeah, I guess if you want, you could plug them together. That'll do nothing. But ultimately, coming out of the plane, you'll only have one to fit there and one to fit there. And you could see that we don't have a lot of junk flying all over the place. They're all the right length and exactly the way I want them. So let's get on to the next steps. All right, gents, ladies, maybe. We have some decisions to make now. So we have to put this in as a doubler for where you put the wing bolts through in order to hold that. Now this wing has some dihedral to it, so the wings flipped over will actually go up for stability purposes. But anyway, this piece is pretty rocky on here, but has to go there. You can just tighten that up and that'll draw that thing in, and I could push down on it, it'll be just fine. If you like to transport your wing in 2 pieces, that's fine. Go ahead and do that, and don't do what I'm going to do. I am going to glue this together so it somewhat comes apart if I need to. and I'm not going to make it like super aggressive glued together. But what I do want to use is some thick CA in here. You can choose to use epoxy, whatever it is that you want, but I'm going to take some of this thick, again, Star Bond, make some really nice glue. If you haven't seen it in any of the other portions, we're going to go ahead and take out one of our little nozzles here. We have to cut the end open. Just take a razor. There's that. And the reason I'm using this is to take up a little bit of space. You could go ahead and use accelerator in here if you want. I am going to choose not to because I want a little bit of working time with this. Take out the little freshness seal in here. Probably best never to do this over the top of your project because you don't want it to spill on it. So that thing's out. Now we're going to go ahead and put this on here. Screw that on. Now this thing also comes in the kit with extra pipettes and then a little red needle stopper to plug it up. So anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and take this and put a little bit of glue here on that front surface. Then I'm going to squeeze these together like such. And then I'm going to take a clamp on the front. And we're going to squeeze that there to really pull this wing together. Now, for the back side, we have to center over our holes. And the nice part is we already went ahead and pressed down this covering, but I am going to mark an outline where that goes. And guys, here is one of the best tips I can ever give you in my entire life. When we do this, anytime you work on a model that you have to cut off some of the model's covering, try and keep it in a nice big section and try not to ruin it. And this will go in my covering bin, and hopefully we can save this. And this one's going to prove me wrong. Doesn't look like I'm going to be able to. But I save all of these pieces. Well, the thought's better than the result, I guess. And I save these in case you ever poke a hole or you need covering to match, you would have it. In this case, I've already pressed this covering down so hard that I'm not going to get any good samples out of this. But neither here nor there, I guess. The goal's not to destroy it. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to put on the vertical stab. There's a couple pieces to this. So just like we did before, we have to glue in the rudder to the vertical, and then we're going to make sure that's nice and straight and epoxy that down. So when you do this, make sure you check your spacing here before we glue this to there, okay? So that we know that we have good space and it doesn't rub. Then we're going to go ahead and do like we did for the aileron horns. We're going to sand down those edges, and we're going to install those on both sides, trying to get that hole right exactly on the hinge line for our pull rudder. And then the last step is we also have this custom piece to put in there if you so wish. Now, right above that pin, if you go fishing around up there, you will find that crease where that thing really is. So that's, you could feel it if you push down on the covering. You can go ahead and poke a hole and go back, but what I like is if you didn't want to put this in it's already sealed, so you don't have to worry about it. But time lapse. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brendan's Using the Laser. Everybody always asks where you get these. This is just a regular Home Depot, go buy one at Christmas time laser that are doorbuster deals. So we have to put in the vertical stab now, and we have to glue, right? And they only show you to glue in the pegs and then that part. That's not great because it's not real strong. I like stuff built strong. So we're going to use some slow cure epoxy in here. I've pulled the covering off right there all the way up through so it can really bond underneath that wood. So this is all, even though it's stained yellow, that's all sanded down. We've used level, and we have leveled our fuselage, and we rested on bean bags. So that's a nice part. If you have a round fuse, get some cornhole bean bags, and they rest really nicely on there. So now we've shot the laser right through here, right all the way up through my center line up there. When we glue this in, that laser is going to run really nice right up the back of this, and then we know where to position this thing so it is nice and straight and vertical. Because when you set this in, now we're going to reference the tail this way, and I've already put tails in straight this way, but I've had them like this, crooked. And it takes a lot of aileron to take that out, and it doesn't make for a great flying or neutral flying plane. This stuff I put on the outside of the rudder in case we have epoxy leakage, but I did that before I started cutting the covering, so I know exactly where my lines are that I need to stay away from. So that's why that's there. But with that being said, it is time to get epoxy in and get this bad boy lined up. Now we're going to go ahead, the vertical is done. Now we're going to go ahead and do the horizontal. So I have placed no elevator, all right? I have placed the horizontal in there, and I've put a piece of tape on one side. That is my edge. So I've already done my measurements, and I'll show you here what I did. But first off, this is one of the most important things you can do. In an ARF, this is where you find all the problems, and this one is phenomenal. So I use the laser. Again, if you guys can see that line right there without the camera in the way, notice how my laser trails right at the edge of the horizontal, and we're right up through the vertical, which is perfect. I have a nice level fuselage, and I have a perfect rudder and a perfect horizontal. So what do we have to do here? Well, one of the big things is find the center of the fuse and put yourself a loose knot right there. We have to make sure that this thing is also square. So I go ahead and I measure here, and I use the piece of tape on the string, and then I come over to the exact same spot on the other side, and I stretch it to make sure that it's the same. And I'll do that at a couple points just in case they sand something a little bit further on one side than the other. So I usually go here, and all I do is put a piece of tape on there that I could slide up and down the string. So we know that this is square to the center of the fuselage, and now I know that I'm not tilted this way. So the tape will help to mark that. Now, one of the other things is you also want to make sure that you use a ruler and that we measure. Where did I put mine? It's up here somewhere, right here. You want to make sure that you guys are measuring from the fuselage to the opposite end of the length here of the horizontal. So we want the distance to be the same on both sides, and then we also want it to be square with the string. And if you level here and laser the T in the back, guys, this is how you wind up with good flying airplanes. So I'm not going to use CA in there, and one of the nice parts on this model is there's a servo cutout right there, and you can actually epoxy everything from the underside, and as long as we use slow cure, all that stuff's going to wick in, and I don't have to worry about anything coming apart on me. So what we have to do here, and it's very important that we follow the steps exactly. I put the piece of tape here because when I go to glue this thing in, I'm going to put some epoxy on here at this point, and I am going to slide it back and forth and I'm going to work it. And when I do, it's going to push it over this piece of tape. And then on the other side, I can just put the epoxy there, and then I'm going to do the same thing and push it back over and then clean that up. The underside, I can just epoxy in through that hole and I'll be good. So before I do this though, it's very important that you don't get yourself messed up here. So I'll pull this out. So the elevator has to go in first, and you see the cutout with for the horn. Make sure you guys don't put this in upside down. So this thing's going to go in this way. That sits in there like that. Then this thing is going to go in, and we are going to push that into place, epoxy it, slow cure. Make sure it's slow cure, at least half an hour, if not all night. So that way you can move this thing around and just let it sit alone. Again, we have the beanbag stabilizing the fuse. We know everything is level. I've done a rough fit, and that lets you know if the saddle needs to be sanded. That's what gives you this. So you may have to sand the saddle. But like I said, most of the time with an ARF, that's where they're misbuilt and give you a garbage flying plane. This one, they did a great job on this. I'm super happy with it. So we're going to time lapse, and we're going to get this baby epoxied in and let it sit. All right, and just like we did before, we're using the thin CA again, Star Bond with a pipette. And we're going to go from the top down. Just like that. That looks good. We can pull those out. Let's do the other side. Now that the elevator is in, we're going to go ahead and install our control horn. All right, we've done a rough test fit of the nose and the motor mount just to make sure that everything fits, because really an E-flite Power 60 is optimally what this is designed for. But I went with a Power 90 because it's more universal. It's going to go into other planes. Should I retire this, crash this, whatever happens, most likely the motor is going to live and I can use it in other projects. And I like the size of here. I also hate underpowered airplanes, so if I can make something a little bigger fit, it's going in. And I have the ability to do 8S here also. So the motor box is roughly installed. I put the Power 90 on to see where I have to be for fitment, and ultimately I put the retract down at the bottom and made sure that this nose slides all the way on, so that way my gear didn't give me an issue right there, and all that looks really good. So ultimately, I'm going to pop you off here. So this motor needs to be spaced right up at the top of this box. So I'm just going to grind out the little fillets here, those little flanges, and then we're going to put washers underneath, and we're going to get this motor mounted, and then we also have to get the box mounted with screws. So that's what we're going to do now. All right, we have our spacers glued in there, and we're going to go ahead. We've put washers on those bolts that they give you to go in the inside of there. Those look like 4 mil. And we're going to throw some Loctite on those things. And we have to get this one on first before we go ahead and put on the motor on the front. All right, motor's mounted. We used some beveled spacers there. I really like the look of those. I made a little platform for the ESC to sit on and just simply zip tied it, keeping it simple. Over here we've attached the wiring down the side, and I also drilled a hole here, so as the air comes in there, There we have lots of airflow over the ESC, and I'll show you guys the cutouts in a second. And we have airflow in there and there, so lots of places to keep this thing nice and cool. So AMOS 150 anti-sparks that we use in everything. Wiring is in for telemetry and power. All right, guys, for the electric, there's actually a block off on the inside of the plane. I'll show you that. But they want you for electric to cut this out, so that way the air flowing through the cowl will push out this way. But there's a baffle back here to stop the airflow from going down the fuse, and it'll exit out here. So we're just going to just go ahead and trace these components, and then we'll knock out the pieces. All right, let's go ahead and get the cowling mounted up on this thing. So I want to show you guys something you want to be careful of. So this canopy notches into the front and drops down. And I just know I'm going to run into this because I've done it with so many other planes. That fits in there really nicely, right? And then that'll be held down. And then one of the first things we're going to do is slide this over. Like so. And we're going to put on our spinner. And this is what really sets the tone for everything, is the spinner back plate, which is a really nice spinner back plate. See them lugs on there? That fits up into the spinner cone. So that's really, really nice. All right, now, so what we're going to do is we're just going to center this cowling to match the spinner back plate, which is really, in essence, easy to do. If you wanted to and you wanted spacers, here's some spacers. That's cheap spacers, right? You could do that. So that works. But here's the thing you want to be careful of. You don't want this cowling to be pushed down. If you push this thing down, and we just randomly choose to drill some holes in here for this thing, what'll happen is it's going to be very, very hard to get the canopy in. So we almost want to lift up when we do this for our spacing, so that way we have a little bit of a shim in here, like so. That way we have room to slide our canopy in and out. Otherwise it's too tight, and when you force it in there, eventually you crack this, and then that sucks. So anyway, line up your lines on the side, your paint marks. We make sure our spacing is good. We make sure our centering is good. And we are just going to drill a couple small holes because we can get to the inside and we can reinforce those with some nice blocks. So I'm going to come in here probably about a ½ inch, and we're going to do maybe 3 of these on each side. So one there, one down, and maybe one on the bottom. But for sure we'll get them in there, and then we'll see what that looks like. So let's get to it. Now we're just going to go ahead and reinforce these screw holes from the inside. And we're also going to reinforce around the cowling holes. Now, a lot of times I will put inserts in here, but that's more so with gas planes, because what happens is you have a lot of vibration and stuff. So for here though, we'll be good with just some reinforcement of the fiberglass, strengthening it up. And again, we're using the Starbond thin CA for this project. We have some accelerator in a nice pump bottle, so that stuff dries right away. All right, guys, time to start making some linkages here. So in this kit, they give you quick links, and then they give you smaller rods, 2.5 mil, I believe these are, and they're threaded at one end and not the other, and then you just thread in the nice hardware they give you for this end, which is fine, and then this goes on the other end. These have worked forever. I've used them a long time, but I hate dealing with these barrels on the back side of the servo arms and stuff, so I typically won't use those. So what I'm doing is opting for making my own, and I am going with 256 golden clevis threaded rod in these. And to keep the threaded rod nice and stiff, I just slide that tubing over the end of the threaded shaft, so it looks like this. And I've actually seen near Schweitzer do this a lot. I like the way that he does this, and on certain planes I'll actually do that if I don't want to use the heavy titanium ones. So for the ailerons, I'm cutting those to length. They are 74, call it 75 mil for both the ailerons. Let me show you what that ultimately looks like. So here's what that looks like. You could see our 256 golden clevis. We have a jam nut. You should always use a jam nut when you're using threaded rod, because that will weaken and expand if you don't. And then our ball link, our aluminum tube over the top. If you want to fill it full of an epoxy or something, you can, but that's plenty stout enough for this plane. And then we use a lock nut there, so nothing's going to come off. Choose to use washers there or not, that's up to you. I have never had one come apart, so we can say washer, 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 but I've never seen one fall apart. So, and then for those of you that are superstitious, I always put the pins, in this case up, which while flying would be facing down. So that way, if it ever loses this, wants to come loose, normal pressure keeps it in. That'll never happen, but again, it's all up to you how you want to build your models. Elevator is roughly 68 millimeters. All right, now we're going to go ahead and set the throws. So I'm using just a standard Miracle degree throw meter. Sometimes manufacturers give it to you in millimeters, sometimes it's in degrees. This one's degrees. So like the back, the elevator, they wanted 30 degrees total for max deflection, and then low rates was half of that. And this one, they want 35 degrees, and then they want 60% of that as their low rate. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get this dialed in. So now we'll go ahead and we'll put in Cockpit. So it actually looks like we have to cut these out, which kind of stinks, but all right, we'll pause. We don't need to time lapse this. I'll be right back. All right, we're back. Let's go ahead and put this on now. Now, when cutting out the canopy, I use curved Lexan scissors. These usually work really good. And they have a mold line for you to follow here to cut this out. All right, so one of the things that you'll notice, like, I've seen a lot of videos without this canopy in there, and I know why. It's very hard to get in, and it's very thin plastic. And even though I cut reliefs in there, if you guys can see that, it chipped away at some of the plastic on the inside. Not the end of the world. We're still going to go ahead and glue this whole thing into place, and then maybe just put some tape under the backside so it doesn't stand out so much from the top. But not a lot we can do, but it definitely looks better with something in there than not, in my opinion. So, yeah, is what it is. It's not an amazing interior set, but it keeps it from seeing everything inside, especially if it's not a clean install. So we'll roll with it. Well, guys, she's done. Let me take you around this airplane. So this is the 66-inch wingspan Sebart Marchetti, available at Gator-Rc. Two different schemes available here, the yellow and the black, and a red and the white. So starting off first, included spinner. I'm running a Falcon prop 16 by 12 on this thing. The lighting is UniLight, so I added those. It did come with LEDs. I chose to use something a little better, a little brighter. King Max servos, 5325 digitals all the way around, high voltage, available at Gator. I choose to use my linkage in there for elevator and ailerons. For rudder pull, I used what was included. Build quality was stellar. So when we look at ease of assembly, I have about 16 hours total into this thing. Wing saddles are perfect. The tail aligned perfectly, no issues. Canopy and cowl fit really good. Again, really like the spinner that came with that. Let's pop this off. Another minus was the interior cockpit. Not crazy on the seat look. And when you go to flex it to get it in there, it cracks right there. So not much we can do. Power 90 in the inside. Jetty Mezzin 120 light with telemetry. 6S. I plan on running 6200s, but you can run 52, 53s. You got plenty of battery bay in this thing. Your UniLight controller. Hansen Hobbies polarized connectors, so that way they click, positive locks, and I reverse males and females on each side, so there's no way you can plug in ailerons backwards. We have Jetty 2.4 for control, 900 megahertz backup, again King Max all the way around, available at Gator-Rc. This, guys, is a Scorpion battery backup, 420 milliamp pack. That thing is powered when this is plugged in. That will charge that pack. When you're done, you turn this thing off and you unplug the battery. But if you like your electric planes, that thing is invaluable. I used to use OptiGuards. They went out of business. Now I use the Scorpion in here. So if you should happen to fry a BEC, lose power, this thing hops in automatically. You won't lose control of the ailerons, elevator, rudder, gear, and that'll be enough to get the plane back to the ground or safely out of the way from destroying something else around the field or hurting somebody. So again, super cool, super worth it for like 50 bucks. All of our wiring is cut to length. You could see the retract controller in there. Again, with all the lighting just adds so much miscellaneous wires everywhere, but for as clean as I want to make it, that's perfect. Again, really good quality, really nicely built, really good glue joints. I'm super happy with the way the whole thing went together. I have no issues that this is going to be a phenomenal plane. Some of the other cool things here with Jetty black box telemetry in this, you can see them. Look at them anti-collision lights there. Got our wingtip lights. How wild is that? So we have milliamp capacity, so we know when the battery's going dead. We have our BEC voltage. We have motor RPM. We got a timer. And then, so this is something else cool I do with my electrics. We have an active throttle there. And then here we have an idle.
Motor idle speed.
So that will be a constant while flying. And what that does is prevent you from cogging the ESC, as well as gives you a little bit extra runtime because you're not constantly going from 0 up with RPM. And the other nice thing is it'll keep a consistent RPM for landing, so it's a little bit easier to judge because it's consistent. So something I've done with my electrics for a while. But again, super cool plane, available over at Gator-Rc. Link down in the description below. So do me a favor, check them out there. Otherwise, I am going to do my end wrap up as always. Here we go. All right, guys, and that wraps up this portion of the Sebart Marchetti, available over at Gator-Rc. Links down in the description below. Again, available in the yellow and black and also the red scheme for you. So if the Marchetti is not your cup of tea, that's okay. They have a full variety of products over there, really a one-stop hobby shop. Check them out over at www.gator-rc.com. So if you're looking for Seagulls models, Sebart models, Top RC models, Maxford USA models, they got so many cool products over there. If you're looking for Jetty products, E-Flight products, King Max servos, all kinds of stuff, you'll find it over there. So with that being said, this is an incredible model that I have here in front of me. I absolutely can't wait to get this thing out to the field. So again, I'm Brendan. This is Just Plain Crazy. You guys are just plain crazy for always hanging out and watching. I appreciate every one of you. Shameless plug time, like, share, subscribe, all that cool stuff really helps the channel to grow. I need you to smash this thing for me. If you are going to hit this bad boy, definitely make sure you're doing that thing twice. And don't forget to check us out over on the official Just Plain Crazy pages on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. So with that being said, guys, I'm out. I wish you guys happy flights.